The natural granule of the world of physics is the atom. Life has its counterpart. The natural granule of the world of biology is the cell, the building block of life as we know it. Picture the infant Earth 1,000 million years ago, covered by water, volcanoes erupting, land masses and continents taking shape. The world is ripe for the advent of the cell. The free energy of the infant Earth had become capable of coiling back into itself. Teilhard will refer often to this process of coiling, which he also calls enfolding. This is a key concept in his ongoing discussion of centration and his law of complexity consciousness. Coiling, enfolding, centration, this is what drives the work of synthesis, giving rise to changes of state in the evolution of both the without and the within. On the primal Earth, after millions of years and through eons of changing conditions, all the conditions are just right. Suddenly, there is a change of state. Life in cellular form is born. And so we've seen the elemental stuff of the universe transformed into atoms, then through immense evolutionary time into molecules, organic molecules, and finally into cells. Life as we know it has finally appeared. Let's watch as life expands from a single cell. First, the living particle is wrenched from itself. Then it is caught up in an aggregate greater than itself. It seems to be lost in number. Gradually, it is absorbed into a collectivity, an emerging pattern of interrelationships. And finally, it stretches out in becoming, transformed into something greater than itself. This is a major leap forward in physical complexity and also in the degree of centration. This dramatic and perpetual opposition between the many born out of the one and the one constantly being born out of the many, this runs right through evolution. Millions of forms jostling, shoving, competing for space and resources. Nature seems to try everything, to experiment with all possibilities, constantly groping toward new forms as a solution to survival. Teilhard states emphatically that it would be a mistake to see this movement as mere random chance. The groping, the experimentation, the trial and error have an underlying direction. Teilhard says that groping is directed chance. This notion of directed chance, the notion that evolutionary change has a direction, has a formal name, orthogenesis. Orthogenesis is not a universally accepted idea. In fact, if you do an online search for orthogenesis, you'll find a Wikipedia entry that says, orthogenesis, also known as evolutionary progress, is an obsolete biological hypothesis. Even during Teilhard's lifetime, the concept of orthogenesis was controversial. Teilhard himself wrote, quote, all scientists are now in agreement about the general fact that there is an evolution, but whether or not this evolution is directed is quite another matter, unquote. Teilhard continues, ask a biologist today if he accepts that life is going somewhere in the process of its transformation, and 9 times out of 10, he will answer no, even vehemently. But Teilhard continued to insist that evolution does have an inbuilt direction. Even if orthogenesis is not a universally accepted idea, neither is it a universally rejected idea. In our own time, some acceptance of the idea, or something like it, seems to be developing. In fact, near the end of the Wikipedia article we mentioned a moment ago, it says, "The late 20th and early 21st centuries have seen the rise of evolutionary developmental biology, a discipline that incorporates the physics of self-organization." Still quoting, "In this discipline, ideas of directions of morphological change have made a reappearance in evolutionary theory." David Sloan Wilson, a respected hard scientist in evolutionary developmental biology, makes a strong claim in his book, This View of Life, Completing a Darwinian Revolution. In that book, he writes, "In light of recent developments in modern evolutionary science, we can now answer in the affirmative every deep philosophical question posed by Teilhard." Of course, the question of directionality in evolution is more than a deep philosophical question. It's also a scientific question. In his 2021 book, The Cosmic Vision of Teilhard de Chardin, John Hott writes, "Since Teilhard's death in 1955, new developments have taken place in biology, cosmology, and other scientific fields. So we cannot expect that his books and essays will respond perfectly to all the questions we raise today about the religious and theological implications of science. Nevertheless," Hott continues, "Teilhard left us with lines of thought whose general drift remains as exciting and liberating today as ever." In any case, a directionality to evolution is a crucial component of Teilhard's vision. For now, we might note that folks who categorically reject directionality might also be the ones who insist on looking only at the outside of things, ignoring any interiority. In other words, the materialist superstition that we referred to in an earlier session. Here, we affirm the dimension of interiority, and for the sake of understanding Teilhard's vision, we'll provisionally go with his insistence on directionality. But this is an important question, and we'll return to it in various forms as we continue pondering the lines of thought that he left us with. So let's watch as life begins its ascent on Earth. Plurality is certainly in evidence as life begins its ascent. But to see life properly, we must never lose sight of the global unity that embraces the overwhelming multitude of all things. Despite the apparent brutality of an apparently indifferent world for its beings, this latent unity inevitably begins to express itself. This global unity was still diffuse in its early stages, and yet a latent unity into ever more complex forms was to grow ever sharper, finally centering itself in the human. On the large scale, life may seem to be tangled in utter confusion, or it might be considered a simple single wave from one centered origin, but no, this is not the shape that life has taken. Instead, life branches, it ramifies, it arranges itself into classes, orders, families, genera, species. Life, as it advances, splits into natural living bundles called phyla. Each phylum can be as small and simple as a single species, or as vast and complex as a subkingdom. Over time, the species within a particular phylum may evolve in such a way that they form the bud of a new phylum, and the tree continues to ramify. Alternatively, a particular phylum may become stable, so to speak, and in evolutionary terms, the phylum closes over, ending a particular area of development on the tree. The tree of life is a well-defined structural reality. Each member can be traced down to the common roots. Life in its totality, from the very first stages of evolution, is like one single gigantic organism, rooted in the abysses of the immeasurable past. There are three major branches on the tree. One leads to the plant kingdom. Another leads to the insect world. And the third, appearing about 500 million years ago, is the vertebrate branch. The vertebrate branch evolved through stages including the chordates. Eventually, on this branch, there appeared a new stem leading to the mammal world. At the top of this stem, a tiny lobe will appear, a recent offshoot on the tree of life. In it, we will finally make our appearance on the scene some 2 to 3 million years ago, a split second in evolutionary time. Teilhard maintains that there is a kind of guiding thread that will lead us through the tangled labyrinth of living creatures, a line of progress which, he is convinced, will be recognized by the science of tomorrow. According to Teilhard, we have simply to trace the progression of groups on the tree of life, where the successive species shows a definite increase in interiority. Consciousness increases on all the branches, but to locate the area that shows outstanding growth of the within, or consciousness, we have to look at the huge stem on the left of the tree, the chordate branch. Here we find, from layer to layer, massive leaps of consciousness, signified objectively by the development of ever more complex and organized brains and nervous systems. For Teilhard, this rising line of increasing interiority is our guide through the labyrinth of living creatures. The mammals and their successors constitute the dominant branch on the tree of life. In recent years, there have been a number of new representations of the tree of life. Here's one that I like, because it isn't quite so anthropocentric. Humans are still at the top of this tree, but we're not as lonely as in some other versions of the tree. At this point, we encounter another topic that we'll have to look at very closely in our revisiting of Teilhard. That topic is what I call the crown of creation fallacy, where humans stand completely above and even divorced from all the other lives who share our planet. For the moment, we'll set that aside and continue with Teilhard as he focuses on what he calls the dominant branch on the tree of life, the mammals. To the most recent shoot on that branch, the primates, belongs the honor of bridging the era of life and thought, the furthest extension of consciousness so far. Why the primates? Because in them, evolution went straight to work on the brain, almost neglecting everything else. And here we come to one of Teilhard's most poetic passages. In one well-marked region at the heart of the mammals, where the most powerful brains ever made by nature are to be found, they become red hot. And right at the heart of that glow burns a point of incandescence. Quoting directly from Teilhard, we must not lose sight of that line crimsoned by the dawn. After millions of years rising below the horizon, a flame bursts forth. Thought is born.